Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, so hi everyone. Welcome to Montenegro. It's a place where I've been living the last 6 years, at least in the long extended summers that you have here from May to December. I was here. Montenegro for me was, after 15 years of a crazy roller coaster around the world, finally the place where I had the chance to slow down a little bit in this beautiful, wild, untouched nature. I haven't done any talks for a couple of years. So back in the days, my presentations looked a bit like this. They had this kind of titles. This one I gave like 20 times somewhere around the world. But I also had this one, which was a TED Talk in Kotor. I had this as a talk title a couple of times. And one last one, this one, which I think was in Bangkok in 2018. But it's interesting that here it says, been there, done that, what's next? This what's next was a steady question in my life. But I thought, I cannot give those talks anymore because I'm over it. And probably you know you can work from anywhere, even if it's a Land Rover Defender. I somehow had to come up with a title that is current, that is actual, that is up to date for me, something more honest, something that is interesting to myself at the moment, something where I'm at. So the title for today is this: From Rugged Paths to Quiet Depths, a Search for Inner Peace. The guy here with the blue suit is me. That's in a Mexican cenote in a small village on the Yucatan Peninsula called Cenotillo. And I'm coming up here from a dive on breasthole to 88 meters. This at the time was the third deepest dive a German had done in this discipline. But more about that later. Actually, when I tried to be the deepest German, I ended up in hospital. So more about that later too. You see, I started traveling when I was 21. This was in the year 2002. Back then there was no smartphones. There was not really internet. This is in Chiang Mai actually. And when you wanted to go and write someone an email, you had to go to these very uncomfortable places with these big screens. There wasn't any flat screens yet, and they were flickering, and then there was these sticky keyboards, an uncomfortable chair. And you would do that maybe every 3-4 weeks to say, hi mom, hi dad, I'm fine, don't worry, goodbye. Because you had to identify which was the Latin letters on the Thai keyboard. So this is how it worked back then. And I loved that way of traveling. Back in 2002, also a book came out, which I really love. It was called Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. Has anybody read that book? Awesome, yeah. Tim Ferriss recommended it a lot and had him on the podcast. But I loved that book especially for two things that were written in there. One, that Rolf Potts was saying traveling gives you the opportunity to be lost, bored, and lonely. Because when you're lost, you have to ask a stranger for the way. And I remember beautiful memories of Moroccan old towns in Tangier or Fes or Meknes where you're lost. And then little kids would say, this is the way to the Kasbah. Back in the days before there was Google Maps. Now when you're lonely, you have to learn how to be more extroverted. Talk to a stranger, talk to someone, chat up someone in the bar. And when you're bored, you had to use your inner fantasy to come up with cool things to think about, or maybe, read a book or something like that. Well, now it's Google Maps, Instagram, and Tinder. So this was very different times, and I'm really happy that I started traveling back then. I come back to those themes later. Now, the other thing why I really love this book is another quote that was in there, which said, walk until the day becomes interesting. And Rolf Potts in this book talks a lot about tourists, travelers, and vagabonds. Tourists being the people that come out of a cruise ship and then they follow a guide through the town and they stay in this little pulk of people and this circle that is protected by the guide. Travelers, which we probably all here were at one point, who take the Stefan Lohse catalog or the Lonely Planet or the Rough Guides, and they see when you're in this town, you can go to that town, and this train takes that long, and it costs so much baht and that much pesos. And then he was coming up with the concept of vagabonds, which are just the notion of just sitting at a place and seeing what happens without any plans. And I love traveling like that for 15 years, just to be somewhere and wait, or to, as he says, walk until the day becomes interesting. Now, after this first trip to Thailand, I knew I just wanted to travel for the rest of my life. Not only because I love traveling, like this cultural diversity, learning new languages, meeting all these different people, but also I'm from a town in Germany which is called Detmold. And there's not much going on. And you know what is close to Detmold? Yes. And we all know that this city does not exist. Right. Who does know that? All right.
Where I'm from?
Yeah.
You know where I'm from?
No.
From Herford.
Whoa. HF. Der Go-Park, gibt's den noch?
Yes. We had the heuereka 2 years ago at Herford.
Really? That's funny, man. Yeah, Extenstein around the corner, everything. Cool. So, I needed to get out of there. Yesterday on the boat I heard so many people saying it's better than Germany. So, why did you go to Cyprus? We're definitely out of Germany was always the first answer. So, I kept traveling like that, and I did a year in Chile. I started doing an internship at an amazing startup back in 2004. A beautiful startup in Santiago de Chile. Worked there for a year, learning Spanish, learning new languages, opened new horizons. It was beautiful. And I was even more convinced that I needed to stay out and travel for the rest of my life. So I did my bachelor in Madrid. It was supposed to be 3 months, stayed there whole week, whole year there. And then I made Berlin my base in summers. So I was in summers in Berlin, I did a master. But one day when I got out of university, there was this guy with long hair standing on the other side of the street in Schlesische Straße, where the Xberger hostel is, for those of you who know. And he was playing a guitar that I wanted to buy at the time. It was this backpacker guitar. And I said, hey, can I try it? And Javier, long hair Spanish guy from Barcelona, told me, yeah. And while I was playing, I think it was Like a Rolling Stone by Dylan, and the Rolling Stones, but he told me that he just drove an old Mercedes 4 years through Africa. I was like, what? At that point I had been to like Morocco a couple of times and Chile and Asia and all these common things, but Africa was always like, I don't really know. So he said, I drove a car 4 years to Africa. I'm like, isn't that dangerous? He's like, no man, you just do this and that, and in Asia you say, in Morocco you say this to the police, and here you do that. And I'm like, wow, I want to do the same. And so I did. I bought a Mercedes, and here's some impressions from that trip. So this is the Mercedes 300D, old model I think from '97. This is the border between Cameroon and Nigeria. I had to be towed a couple of times, but I was one of the, maybe the only guy who had a normal passenger car and drove through that crazy road. So this is the entrance to Cameroon. Yeah, so now at some point when I made it to the Gabonese, Congolese border, I felt super sick. And I had no idea what to do. I looked like that at that time. This shirt I bought in Bogo in Burkina Faso, and I was wearing the same shirt for 6 months. I sometimes cleaned it in the sink. I don't know why I'm saying that. All right. Anyway, I was really sick, and I went to the doctor, and I got this result, as you can see here. I had malaria. Malaria is not a great thing, I wouldn't recommend it. But ultimately, this malaria changed my life in incredible ways. Because, I woke up in other rooms. I woke up once in the bathroom with vomit on my shirt. I was like waking up, not knowing why I'm actually in the bathroom. Crazy delirium. But I went to the doctor, and he had malaria. So sometimes I had these lucid moments. Like malaria is having like a demon possessing your thoughts. You really learn that maybe there's really no free will, and we just have an illusion when we don't have malaria that we are in control. But on malaria, you're definitely not. So I was really happy that sometimes I had these lucid moments where I could do things, and I had Wi-Fi. So on one day, I literally put this into Google, the coolest job in the internet, and I hit enter, and I was in delirium. I had like 93.7, sometimes 40 degrees fever, close to death. Like I was 3 days away from death when I went to the doctor. He said, 3 days more you would be dead. But then I took the medicine and it got better. But a job offer came up. I was in Gabon. After that I needed to go to Peru and then drive through all South America and then it was a world trip, right? So I didn't want a job, but I put this in, and the job offer was from a company in San Francisco which had an office in London. And they said like 30% of your time you spend traveling and something in tech. And I didn't read what they do. So I just put in my name, Fabian, and my last name, and I left the CV upload thing blank, and they had no validation. You could just leave it blank and click submit. And I put my Gabonese number in there. And like, yeah, I don't, whatever. And then the next day, I get a call from a +44 number. And like, hey, this is Maxime from Zendesk. You applied for the job. I'm like, huh? Job? Oh my God, this is the thing. So I went in the browser, a bit like Zendesk.com, like customer support something. It's like, oh yeah, you know, customer support, blah, blah. Totally winged it. And at some point, the guy was like, well, okay, tomorrow the London CEO calls you, so be ready. So I had a little bit of time to read a little bit of Zendesk. And then he calls me and it's like, hey, you're applying for a sales position, like a pre-sales consultant technical position, but you never worked in sales. You're like an IT, you're like a computer science guy. So how do you explain that? It's like, dude, I just bought a Mercedes for 1,000 and I'm selling it for 2.8K in Gabon. I wouldn't say that's a sales weakness. And he was laughing. And I did. I sold it for 2.8K after driving through all these holes. Like Mercedes are great, and like they use them as taxis. They like the motors. There's actually people who just take containers and they put the old 180 motors in containers and ship them to Gambia because they need them as replacement motors for the taxis. So anyway, he said, well, when can you be in London? I was like, okay, I have to get rid of the malaria. I have to shave my hair. 2 weeks. Now he said, okay, come, we pay for that. So he says, when you come to London, don't say hi. Pretend that you're a professional Zendesk salesman and we're going to be sitting in the meeting room and you sell Zendesk to us. And you can decide who we are. So I said, okay, you guys are Blizzard Entertainment. And I come in. So I'm flying to London in an EasyJet flight. I had a stopover in Charles de Gaulle, which was my first culture shock. Like I had been traveling so much, but then after 1 year driving through Africa, you don't see sharp corners. It's all round. And then I came to Charles de Gaulle and was like, my God, there's so many people. It's so quiet at like 6 a.m. in the morning. That was my first culture shock. And everything is straight lines. I've never seen this before. So I'm in the airplane and the business guy next to me leaves a newspaper on the seat. And the front page of the newspaper is like, the new phase of customer success. And it was about that nowadays you cannot just have a great product anymore, you also need to offer great customer support, which is exactly what Zendesk does. So I grabbed the newspaper, went into the meeting room, was like, hey, have you seen what's in the news today? And then they said, okay, you're employed. So I went from this guy to that guy, drove around, flew around Europe, did boot camps and whatnot. It was great. Worked 90 hours a week. We loved it. It was beautiful. It was Zendesk in the beginning. There was 60 people. Now it's 7,000. So I was really at the great time at this amazing startup. But after a year, I thought, it's kind of not so interesting anymore. But some company from Berlin, eDarling, dating company, they needed a data migration. So we as Zendesk promised the client a data migration. We said, if you buy Zendesk with your 120 agents who each pay 100 euros per month, then we put the data migration for free on top. But we were a sales office, so we didn't do data migrations. So I was like, hey, I'm a computer guy, I can make the data migration, maybe. So it's like, okay, try. So I stayed in my house in London, in Victoria Station, in the Mews, in the old horse stables where I lived with a hoarder lady, an old grandma who hoarded things and slept on her crap on top of a carpet. Actually, the crap was so high in the room that she had to take a ladder and sleep on the carpet on top of the crab. But then that was full, and then she started sleeping in the bathtub. And then every morning I woke up with my smart clothes on. I was like, Rosemary, I'm coming down. And she would get out of the bathtub so I could shower in there. That was my life in London. It was not so different from Africa somehow. It was a nice transition from the chaos. So anyway, I did the data migration, which the third-party company that we tried to get quoted 25K for, and we were all mad, like, well, who do they think they are? Data migration, 25K, we can do it ourselves. I did it in a week, so I was kind of the hero of the office. I saved 25K, but then I thought, well, wait a minute. Now that I have the script ready, I could do the data migration next time just by pushing a button, or do like a little bit of customization. So I shouldn't do this here. I should get my own company and do data migrations. And then the CEO was like, yeah, you know, you make your own thing. We sent you some data migrations in the beginning to get you rolling. So I created Helpando, and now I have my own company. I moved back to Berlin. From the first moment, everybody needed data migrations. So I had these clients from the very first moments on. But I was back in Berlin. I actually spent £700 in London for like maybe a 12 square meter place. And I thought, now I take the same money and see what I get in Berlin. And I got a 115 square meter attic. It was amazing. Somebody told me they slept in that place. Gabi was it from yesterday. It was funny. Okay, so now I'm on a road trip in Romania to Varmaveke. And there's a guy on the petrol station who's obsessed about interfaces. And I'm employing him from the petrol station in Romania as my first employee. And then there's another guy, a Vietnamese German guy with tattoos all over his body and like weird piercings and rastas. And he's offering a joint to my mom in Granada, Spain. And that was my second employee. So they now both lived in my living room, and Dominic, the Romanian guy, he had all these Romanian friends, so we outsourced data migrations to Romanian script kiddies. But after a couple of months, I could see where it's going. More money, bigger office, more employees. And that sounded just really boring, because it's like you go to a movie that you've already seen. You know what's going to happen. So I said, something's got to change. And I knew this guy, which I had never met in person, who also somebody here in the audience knows, and his name is David. David only knew me because I wrote a blog article how to get into Ghana from Burkina Faso with a car without having a laissez-passer, like this kind of document that you need to prevent illegal import of cars. And he added me on Facebook. And somehow I knew that he was this adventurous guy. And I went on Facebook and I said, hi David, we don't know each other, but what should I do with my life? This is David, by the way. Oh, sorry. This is David. And he said nothing. He didn't say hi. He just said, buy this thing. Double column and then a link to this Overlander 4x4 kind of message board where there was a Land Rover Defender for sale with a converted rooftop, and it was parked in Argentina. But I was in Berlin. I was like, what the fuck? I don't like cars. You know, I don't want a car. Why would I have a car? And anyway, it's in Buenos Aires, or like in Tigre, next to Buenos Aires. But I was on the toilet, and I thought, wait a second. If Dominic and Vin, we jump into the Land Rover and we drive from Argentina to Colombia, while we run the company and make a video documentary about working from everywhere, then life is going to be fun again. So I went into the living room and said, hey, Vin, Dominic, do you want to do this? And they said, sure. So 2 months later, we flew to Argentina and we created this project. So it was called Startup Diaries. I think it's still online. This is 2014, 15. And we wanted to meet people who redefine work, the Che Guevaras of work. Like back in the days, that wasn't such a common topic, right? It was starting with the end of the office and you can work from everywhere. And less so in South America because, you know, you had some co-working spaces coming up. But we wanted to show exactly that kind of scene of people taking work into their own hand and having this sort of sense of freedom and saying no. Because in South America, it's way worse than in Europe. Like if it's 33 degrees outside, and you work in a cool startup, you still wear long pants and you don't go in flip-flops, you know, it's just like this sort of customs and your boss is an asshole and you cannot talk directly to your boss and the hierarchies are very defined. So these are real rebels in 2015. So we met those guys, interviewed them, made a video blog. This is Dominic, by the way. He always had to pee a lot. One time he had to pee in the desert and he found this bone, which Win then put into his hair. And he walked like this around all the time. So we were in talk shows and they were like, oh, is this from a human being? He says, yes, it's from my ex-girlfriend. So it was great fun. This is how we worked sometimes. This is how we worked sometimes. This is who we were sometimes. And in 2015, the only thing to do that, like 70% of our work we did was this. You know, the big cards are the Africa trip in 2010, and the small cards are the South American trip. Like we used those kind of mobile SIM cards with a little small router, or we had a router that could repeat a Wi-Fi signal, so we would like be on the Panamericana, park next to a gas station, sleep there, and repeat their Wi-Fi signal, and then, you know, this kind of things. Now it's so much easier. Like this even worked in 2015. This trip was great because we got a lot of media coverage. Like Wired magazine called us the first nomad company. And then we went to Bogota and we were like, hey, can we come to your TEDx conference? We are Startup Diaries. They're like, hey, you can also give a talk. And then I had this picture, and then other people invited me to give talks. So I was always the you can work from everywhere kind of freaky guy in like the Frankfurt Main Tower where everybody's in a suit and then they want some crazy person, and they would, these kind of companies, HR companies, would invite me to talk about this stuff. Sometimes you just have to take a breath. Because you can look at all this and you can think, oh wow, beautiful chain of serendipitous events, happy accidents, right? But was it really that? Or was it just me being so open to any distraction, any escape that would prevent what comes up in silence? And my talk is kind of more about that now. Because the silence seemed to be threatening to me. Maybe I was running away from something, from the demons, from my childhood traumas. You know, and you can become an expert of that and even make a career of it. When people put you on stages like, hey, talk about the crazy shit. It's like, okay. So yeah, for sure, it's annoying when people say, oh, look, the travelers, they're just running away from something. I never believed that. Because we're all running towards something, which is beautiful. It's new languages, new people, it's amazing. But I was definitely also running away from something. And I especially noticed that when coming back to this place. You know, imagine you're coming from that Africa trip where you talk to 500 people every day and you drive through crazy roads, or you come from the Startup Diaries trip where it's like you have to compress your 8 hours of work per day to 3, drive 20 kilometers, do interviews, talk shows, edit videos, filming, parties. And then you come back to this place. It's like, oh God, what's next? What's next? What's next? Reminds me of James Hetfield, the lead singer of Metallica, when he comes back from a tour, he just watches his bees. He's a beekeeper. But I didn't watch any bees. I went crazy in Berlin nightlife. Until one day, I had like this crack in my back. And I went to the doctor, and you can see here the LWK 4-5 segment, slip disc, hernia, Bandscheibenvorfall. They said, you're always gonna have pain now. I'm like, fuck. I couldn't even sit in a restaurant for more than 3 minutes. I said, yeah, you know, you gotta do this and that, physiotherapy and la la la. I did, nothing helped. I still had the horrible pain, which is completely gone, by the way, now. But I just did another escape. Let's go on my birthday to Morocco with a Defender. So here I am in Morocco. This is 3 kilos worth of hashish. It was my birthday. And this was funny because first I would drive to Malaga, pick up Kenny from the airport, drive through Morocco. This is in Kitama, by the way, crazy place. Then drop off Kenny in Malaga, and 5 minutes later Simon would come to the same airport, and we would drive through Portugal, and then this date from Brazil would come to the same airport, and then we would go to Malaga and Granada. And I did all that. It was horrible back pain, especially in the Land Rover seat. It's horrible. So I came back to Malaga and dropped off the Brazilian date. And she walked into the room, into the airport. And then I was like, wait a second, there's nothing coming now. Nothing. I had no work. I had no plans. I was like, what am I going to do now? And my back pain went away. The back pain was gone in that moment because there was nothing else. And so I used that time to just be a month in the Land Rover on my own. And I listened to a SWR 2 podcast at that time, which was about aufhören. It's the German word for stopping. And usually people, when they stop something, they start something new. But if you look at the word itself, it consists of two phases, like to listen to something, the inner voice maybe. And so my inner voice clearly told me, you gotta stop and do nothing new. Nothing, that's hard. Ram Dass once said famously, every method becomes a trap. You get really good at something, and you just want to keep it on and on and on. But at some point, the whole travel didn't give me any benefit anymore. So the method became a trap. So I thought I need to slow down, go to a place where I would like reflect and write a book. Where can I go? And I have been to Morocco, going from Germany in the Land Rover to Spain, France, blah, Tarifa ferry, so many times that I just went the other way down. So I was in Croatia, and there was all these Germans with their white camping cars and satellite dishes. So it's like, let's go one country down. What's there? Oh, it's a James Bond country. And I booked this house, and I stayed there for 4 months, wrote a book. And then I fell in love with this country here. And I bought this little house. This is the view from the house. I woke up to this every morning. I lived healthy in nature for a year. I still couldn't sit still though. I still was doing something all the time. Working, running, hiking, blah, workouts. I became a fortification guide for the Austrian-Hungarian fortifications in Montenegro, and so on and so on. Now I tried meditation. I did a silence retreat, but I just thought about how I'm gonna decorate my new house in 10 days. So meditation didn't really work. But on a trip to Mexico, I did this. This is the first time I ever did this. It was a cold day in a suit that was too big for me. Pepe Salcedo was my teacher, if anybody knows that guy. And I had to force myself down. I think the microphone is different now. Because I nearly drowned as a kid. So this was horrific for me. Diving to 10 meters was absolutely horrific for me. But I did it. And you can see there, a very bad technique. And I forced myself through this experience. And when I came up to the surface, I was a new person. I overcame this deep trauma of drowning. And so that was 6 years ago, and since then I did nothing else than freediving. At least in the winters. I was high for a whole week after this. You know, so I drove around, I've traveled around the world again. Mexico, Egypt, Bali, Dominica, Colombia, Philippines. I trained and learned from the athletes, from coaches, until I came to my first competition here in Mexico. I became the third deepest German. This is an 88-meter dive. And then I got to Kalamata, became the second deepest German. This is 92 meters. You see, for those of you who have done the breathwork this morning, when you're lying there on the water surface, it's kind of like that. You breathe deeply into your belly, then into your chest, 4 or 5 seconds in, 6, 8 seconds out, sometimes something like that. And the thing is, if you don't do it well, then there's danger. Because if you're not relaxed, you will get into trouble down there, or when you come up again. You don't want to be out of breath at 88 meters in the depths. So it is a forced meditation for impatient people like me. And this was ultimately what made me slow down. After that, I understood meditation. So here, you pull yourself down slowly to about 40 meters, and then you let yourself fall, because then you're negatively buoyant, so you just fall. Your brain, the blood stops flowing in the outer brain area, so you go back in human evolution like a couple of million years to being a reptile again. Umberto Pilizzari, one of the most still living legends, said the scuba diver dives to look around. Oh, now it's back to normal. And the freediver dives to look inside, because you learn a lot about yourself when you do this. Sometimes the hard way. Here, this is a picture of me trying to be the deepest German freediver after I had successfully become the second deepest. But I didn't make it, and then I got here. IV needle in my arm, a night in the hospital in Cyprus, Limassol. And lying in this hospital bed was actually worse than blacking out underwater. It's like, what I'm gonna do now? The whole night in the fucking hospital. But I had a chance to reflect, did I started freediving to become the deepest? No, It's once again the slimy, ugly ego taking over to distort you from stillness. You know, this is something I always show my students now. We're trying to get out of the head and into the body. And that's what freediving does. That's what breathwork does. It's not the depths we conquer, but ourselves, the freediving proverb says. So I had to recalibrate, reminding myself why I started freediving. And so this year, in May actually, I was in Nicaragua, and here I'm coming up from a dive to 100 meters, which no German ever did in this discipline. So I finally did it, and I was pretty fresh. So, you know, I fulfilled all these things that I ever wanted to do, and was now even the number one in this discipline. I also became a breathwork instructor. I just generated this image with ChatGPT while I was sitting there. So I did 7 months of training to become a breathwork instructor, which was interesting. And I was again like, what now? What now? But I saw this quote. I think it's really good. And so after that, I created something here in Montenegro, which is called Sea Space. And I'm just going to end with showing you what Sea Space is about. We're actually about 8 kilometers Luftlinie from here. And this is what the project is about.
Imagine being there, in the absolute present, the absolute here and now. No emails, no calls, no tasks. Just you, one with the sea, in stillness. That is what freediving is for me. You wake up to the sunrise here at Sea Space in Montenegro, just 2 hours away by flight from any European capital. Whether you find yourself in one of our dorm beds, a private room, or under the open sky in our rooftop beds, the first thing you see is the endless blue of the Adriatic Sea stretching out before you. Sea Space is where we sleep, eat and gather. It's also where you learn everything about freediving, breathing, holding your breath, and all you need to know to safely immerse yourself in the water. Need to work while you're here? Well, Sea Space also has a co-working space with various sea view workspaces. You can also embark on adventurous trips, kayak to the Blue Cave, take a small boat to a coastal old town, explore abandoned Austro-Hungarian fortifications, or just chill out in the Sea Space Bay. And when the day winds down, our rooftop comes alive. A great spot for workouts and breathwork sessions while watching the sunset. Here we share stories during dinner, have jam sessions and forge connections that often last beyond your stay. Sea Space is more than just a freediving retreat. It's a transformative journey, and I would love to welcome you to this experience. Got any questions? Just head to seaspace.me or drop us a message right here.
It's one more slide. You know, I'm doing this for the last couple of years. I had a lot of people there. And maybe this is just a phase again. Maybe this is going to stop. And then something new will come. And maybe very soon, I will all again be lost, bored, and lonely again. But hey, isn't that life? And isn't that the beauty of life and of travel? That it gives us an opportunity to be lost, bored, and lonely. Thank you.